Hi and welcome to my studio, Studio Vinden in Gothenburg, Sweden. Today I'd like to make an attempt to simplify and break down miking techniques for drum recording in your rehearsal space, in your home studio. Getting good drum sounds can be cumbersome, but can also be quite easy. I personally view drums more as an instrument than a collection of different instruments, and this can actually help you when you approach miking up the drum set. First, I want to say that I will bypass some of the obvious issues when recording drums. You want to have a good player, you want to have good drums, you want to have good cymbals, you want to tune the drums correctly and make them sound like you want, like they are suitable for the song, and you want to place the drums in the room where they sound the best. That said, when you've done that, you can do a lot of things just by mic placement and mic choice, and that's where we'll start. The first way of recording drums I want to mention is by using very few mics. Using a few mics to mic up a drum kit is really a viable solution in most cases, except perhaps for metal or hard rock, where you have a very dense mix where the drums really have to poke through. So where would you start if you want to mic your drums in a simple way with few mics? I would start with a kit mic, which can be mono or stereo. This kit mic could be anything really. If you want a more hi-fi recording, I would recommend a condenser mic or perhaps a ribbon if you want a bit darker sound. But you could also use a dynamic mic, which may sound really cool, especially if you put it in the middle of the kit. A good place to start placing the kit mic would be to just listen in the room. Where do the drums sound the best? That's probably a good place to place your mic. But don't be afraid to experiment. The kit mic may sound best in front of the kit, or above the kit as an overhead mic, or a bit away from the kit, or in the middle of the kit. Now, if you've placed the kit mic and you think it sounds good, I think you should think about if you lack something in the drum kit. The things that might lack is the punch of the kick or the definition of the snare. And that's easily solved by putting a dynamic mic in the kick or a dynamic mic on the snare. The other main way of recording drums is to use many mics. This will give you control over the individual elements of the kit, which enables you to balance it later in the mix. The downside of using many microphones is that you will have phase issues between the different mics. You will have mic bleed, which is when sound from an unintended source reaches the mic. So if you say you mic the snare with a microphone, you will almost certainly hear the hi-hat in the snare microphone, which may not be what you want. You can divide the technique of using many microphones into two categories. You have the utility mics and character mics. The utility category for me is to mic up each drum individually, so the kick, the snare, and your individual toms. The most used microphone on these are dynamic microphones, because they can handle the sound pressure coming from the drum. But also in the utility category would be to mic the cymbals or the whole kit, depending on the sound you want. The overhead microphones are most often condenser mics or ribbon mics. You can use a mono overhead or a stereo pair overhead. There are a lot of stereo techniques, you can read up on that. If you want to have real cymbal focus, you can put your overhead mics high. And if you want less cymbal focus, you can put your overhead mics lower, which will give more of a balanced view of the entire kit. For a stereo pair of overhead mics, I would give one rule of thumb, and that is to keep each overhead mic at the same distance from the snare. Assuming that you pan your stereo pair of overhead mics, the snare will then still be in the center of the audio image. Miking up the kit just using the utility category can give great results, but if you want to take it a step further, you can go into what I want to call the character mics. The character mics are things like a mic outside of the kick drum. It can be a snare bottom mic, an alternative mic on the snare, perhaps a small diaphragm condenser mic. You can use a sub-kick, which is a speaker that you place in front of your kick drum and use like a microphone, which will only capture the really low frequencies. Here are some audio examples of the different mic techniques. So that's a really quick look into the vast subject of drum miking. There's lots of information on this on the internet. I'd say that drum tuning and phase relationship would be the next thing to look up if you're really interested in drum miking. I'll put links to some good sources of information in the box below. And as always, don't be too self-conscious. If it sounds good, it probably is.